Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got an outstanding guest. This is probably our most famous guest we've ever had. He is known all around the world. He is as accomplished as you can be. He's as successful as you can be in a sports and a profession that's particularly special to my heart as a kid who grew up on a BMX bike, dreaming of BMX glory. This is somebody who's won the X Games, who's won every major accolade in his sport, who's been on the cover of all the BMX magazines you can imagine, and much more. And more than that, he's just a great guy. Once I booked him and word got out that he would be on the show, dear friends of mine that I've known forever have been reaching out to me to say, I'm so glad you got Terry. He's such a great guy. He's so awesome. This is going to be a heck of a show. So, with no further buildup, I bring to you Terry Adams of the Flatland BMX world. Terry, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate you, and heck of an intro, man. I appreciate it.
Well, I had to cut it short because the list of your accolades is so darn long. We would fill up our whole time, just to list them. I mentioned some of the highlights, the X, and we're going to ask you about these and more. But to win an X Games, to be, Rider of the Year, Flatlander of the Year, not just once but multiple times, and to win awards like the Nora Cup so far apart. From 2008 when you're a really young man to winning Rider of the Year, to be voted by your peers the best rider of what you do in 2020. All these 20 plus years into competition, it's amazing. You've been with Red Bull for 20 years and counting now, right? I mean, you've got all these great sponsors from Red Bull to Canes to Tiger Balm, etc. And anyway, it's just neat. I mean, I told you off air, and I meant it. Your longevity and excellence and championships. You're like the LeBron James of Flatland BMX, and people here in Ponchatoula know it's a big week for BMX. We've got Crew Jones himself coming to town to present the Rad movie downtown. All the 40-something guys like me are nerded up and just can't wait. But here we are. The whole time we've had the real life, bigger, better than Crew Jones in our backyard. So I can't geek out enough here, Terry. I'm going to shut up now so you can start talking. Please tell us about yourself. Tell us about Terry Adams, the person.
This was a lifelong dream of mine as a 12-year-old kid that, grew up in between Hammond, Pumpkin Center, and Ponchatoula. I was a really confused kid in my younger years. I had trouble in school. I had I really couldn't find anything that I could connect with. My mom had me in drum lessons. She had me in baseball. She had me in dance lessons with Lisa Lamone there in Hammond. I was trying everything I could, and I really didn't feel like I found something that spoke to me until I found riding that bike. And when I found it, it pretty much my life changed from there on out, because it was a sport that didn't have any rules. It didn't have anything attached to it to where someone was telling me I was doing something right or wrong. So it changed my entire life. And that obsession as a 12-year-old kid had my mom dropping me off at Bike Zone in Hammond at a young age. She was dropping me off at Dave's Bike Shop here in Ponchatoula.
Yeah, David. Shout out to David Optenhoff. He patched many a tire and fixed many a everything you could bang up on a bike for all the kids in town.
Yeah, that shop was pretty dirty in there. It was definitely a different style. But I spent a lot of time in those bike shops, or a lot of time in Bike Zone, and a lot of the guys that worked in that shop, they were in their 20s then, and I'm still good friends with a lot of those guys that took care of me. And when I mean took care of me, they let me hang out in that shop all day, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. So I kind of rode my bike in that parking lot, and my mom was bringing me back and forth to this BMX track in Baton Rouge that's still there, right off of Perkins. And I had started off kind of racing BMX and doing tricks here and there. And then one day I got a phone call. There was a group of Flatland BMX riders that were looking for another BMX rider that could do tricks. And at that moment, I think I was around 12 or 13. They called the bike shop in Hammond, and they gave these guys my number. And we scheduled a time to meet, and they came down and met me in Ponchatoula, right there where racetrack is right now, right in front. And we rode right there. And that day pretty much changed my life, because it was the day I switched from like wanting to just be an all around BMX rider to like wanting to be a flatland BMX rider.
Right.
And
well, would you mind taking a moment, Terry, to explain to our viewers and our listeners, the difference? Because as I understand it, BMX, is a broader, sport, and flatland is kind of a super specialty within BMX. And would you tell folks what exactly it means to be a flatland BMX rider?
Yeah, flatland BMX it's very the artistic side of BMX. So there's BMX racing, where you're like racing around the track and whoever gets to the finish line first wins. And then there's, BMX park, where guys are like you see out at the skate park, jumping ramps on their bikes. And then BMX flatland, it's this infinite art form where it's pretty much like breakdancing on a bike. And that's what really drew me to it, is the first time I seen it in person on a video and in person. It just kind of seemed like these guys were floating. And as a kid, being 12 years old, I just really had to know how that felt. So I spent my entire life dedicating all the time and energy I had into learning as many tricks as I could at a very young age. And then that obsession of learning tricks became an obsession of wanting to be a professional rider.
Right.
And, at a very young age, to where I would just kind of go through the BMX magazines, and if there was a number in it, I would go to a payphone that I could find anywhere in Ponchatoula at the time, or Hammond, and I would call those 1-800 numbers of those brands. And when they would pick up, I would say, I'm Terry, I'm 12, 13 years old, I want to be sponsored. And
wow.
I kind of got this relationship with all these companies at a young age, because they knew me as the kid that just won't stop calling. And
that's good, the persistence. Well, what a great example that is to youth, that just try again. It's a lot like anything professionally, right? I mean, don't give up at your first no. I would imagine the first time you called Mongoose, Redline, whoever, and you're like, hey, I'm Terry, I'd like to be sponsored. They're like, good luck, kid, hang up.
Yeah, it was pretty much like that, to be honest. You pretty much nailed it. But then as years went on and I was still calling, and then I was sending VHS tapes, I would have my mom film me in the driveway, and we would send those tapes in, and then I would call all the brands again and say, like, did you get my tape? We got your tape. Maybe don't focus so much on wanting to be sponsored and making a living from riding, and which I didn't even know what that meant. I just wanted to be in the magazines at the time. I didn't know that riding a bike, I never thought in a million years as a kid that money would come along with it. I didn't understand that. I wanted to be in the magazines. Just when I would open up a magazine and see these guys, that was kind of my goal in the beginning. So I thought my goal to make that happen was to call these publications and tell them how good I was. But eventually it worked out, because when my mom did start bringing me to these contests, the ones she could drive me to in Florida, my stepdad would bring me, all over the United States. When the photographers were there from the magazine, they definitely recognized. They're like, oh, we think that's Terry. We've been talking to him for years. So I still keep
you started talking, they probably recognized your voice. You're like, yeah, that's the kid from the phone calls.
Exactly. Yeah. I never gave up, man. I called those numbers so many times and sent so many tapes, and it's cool to kind of loop back around with a lot of those companies and say, like, yeah, dude, we remember and we're proud of you. So.
Well, absolutely. And let's give a shout out to your mom, because, we're talking about dreams coming true here. And I know you're going to dig deeper into how your dreams have come true through BMX and flatland. But, as I understand it, and I had the benefit, you're the first person on the show where multiple documentaries have been made about your life. I mean, there are actually folks that may be curious. There are photographers in the room with you right now that are chronicling your life and doing the latest documentary on you, Terry Adams. I've watched at least 2 in the last week in preparation for this interview. But I know from those earlier documentaries that, at first your mom, her dream is just to get you to be a healthy, happy, successful kid. You're born afflicted with asthma. You're very sickly as a child. Then you would run into a wall, and thankfully the good educators at Martha Vineyard Elementary School realized that dyslexia has placed a big obstacle in your life, and so you're struggling at school. You're struggling health wise, and your mom has the the support system in play here, because and as a single mom at one point until your stepfather comes on the scene, she's there for you in so many ways, because I think a lot of moms wouldn't have the energy to do what she did, wouldn't have the vision, the passion, the dream. So hasn't Flatland in a way been an answer to her dreams too, and that it just provided you with a healthy, positive way to be so happy and successful in life? Am I onto something there? Or just tell us about your mom and her role in all of this.
Yeah, you definitely are, because you're definitely onto something, because none of it would have happened without her. I didn't have money to buy a BMX bike like that as a kid. No way. So she was the one purchasing the bikes. How she did it, I don't know. Probably, doing without so I could have. And being able to bring me to the bike shop and trusting those guys and dropping me off and bringing me back and forth to Baton Rouge to let me race. And then when I met the guys that came down from New Orleans to ride with me that day, kind of, letting me hang out with some guys that were a little bit older, and, realizing that this is something that I really love to do, and allow me to ride in that driveway sometimes until the sun came up. So there's a lot of people that live down those streets that I rode on, and they remember, man, I remember you setting up lights and you were out there at 3 a.m.
Wow.
And that's pretty much what I did. She kind of she knew I was struggling in school, and she homeschooled me and got me through junior high and high school. But make no mistake, I was riding my bike a lot when I was a kid, and it was kind of giving me this comfort. And you're right, it was definitely giving her some comfort as well.
Yes.
That she could see that I found something that I was truly attached to. So.
Well, I didn't even think about the leap of faith that you mentioned, which is when you're so precocious, when you take to something at 12 years old, and eventually you become a full-fledged professional by 16 years old, that puts you in life with all these adults essentially, right? So you're riding with people much older than you, and that means sometimes, like you say, being left at a bike shop or a meet or wherever with older folks. So your mom really had to not only dig in as a homeschooling mom, as somebody who's going to go without her own fun stuff so you can have a bike, but she had to trust that you would be okay rolling with these old kids and pros, young men. That's good for her. I want to share some comments here, Terry, because you've got some friends on here putting shout outs. Is this, I don't know if Udi, that I can say your name properly, so forgive me if I say Udi Billo.
Yeah, that's a BMX legend right there from Indiana. Yeah,
forgive me for I have a funky name that most people mispronounce, and you have a beautiful name that I've probably butchered, but he's throwing a shout out to you there. Says that you are an absolute legend. So what do they say? It takes one to know one. Wow, that's got to mean something coming from him. But he says, Terry, that you're making Louisiana proud for 25 years and counting. Amen to that. And making our little town. I love the part of the story you told earlier that it kind of all came to a head right here in Ponchatoula, right? I mean, the guys came to meet you and check you out. Brittany Austin giving the shout out to Ponchatoula there too. Mm-hmm. Brittany, thank you for chiming in and tuning in. To anybody who's watching us live, know that if you're watching live and you have a question for Terry, or if you just want to give him a shout out as his friends have here, we have the ability to post your comments live. So thank you for doing that. We're here with BMX Flatland legend Terry Adams on the Ponchatoula Live Show, talking about his childhood. And I think we just hit the part, Terry, where it's all coming together for you. You've gone from being this little kid who's calling on the phone to somebody who's really getting noticed. And as I alluded to, you're going to go pro at a really young age. So if you don't mind, tell us about that transition from kid with a dream to full-fledged professional BMX rider.
Really, the way it happened was I, uh, I kept to that mindset of just calling numbers. And as I was calling numbers and as I was making it to all these contests, I was also doing my best to stand out as a professional rider. So the way you stand out in flatland BMX is come up with a trick to kind of wow everyone. So I would show up to the contest, and sometimes I wasn't getting the best placing because I was kind of just getting my sea legs on the contest floor. Sometimes it was, it was dead last place. My first X Games in 2002, there's 18 people invited. It's like broadcasted on ESPN. I'm 18 years old, and I ended up getting last place, 18th place in that contest. But then right after that, I got extremely motivated because there was a company in Japan and the owner was there, and he sent me to Japan at my first big international event in 2002. And I'd kind of worked out the nerves from just getting the last place in the X Games, and I ended up winning that contest in Japan. And it gave me a lot of confidence. That event was called the King of Ground, and I spent 2 weeks in Japan on that trip, and we traveled from the south of Japan all the way at the bottom, all the way to the top, and visiting all the bike shops for this bike company. And that company out of Japan was the first company that actually paid me a monthly salary to ride my bike. And it wasn't a bunch of money, but as an 18-year-old kid, you're just looking to live your dream. You're just looking to have a little bit of money come in to where you don't have to work at the bike shop.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because we're going to get into all these wins and accolades as we go through your career, because now, and I won't call it a happy ending because you're still blowing and going and competing at the highest level. But we know that, like I said earlier, we have a LeBron James-esque success story. But when you're 18 and you're dead last, I mean, as a 47-year-old adult, I can say, well, hey, man, stick with it, kid. You're just getting started. But for you, you've been riding competitively for years. You've been pro for a few years, in pro contests. So how do you come back from that? I mean, what does it feel like in the moment? And how did you pick yourself up off the canvas and get back to it to turn it around and win a giant event and gain more sponsorships in such a quick amount of time?
Really, when I think about it, I think it was really easy to pick myself up because I was, at that time, and even today, I just have a lot of respect for all the guys that were competing in a professional level. They're all much older than me. They're all the guys that I looked up to in the magazines. So just kind of being out there on the floor with those guys was extremely motivating to me, to just know that I was in the mix, to just know that I had an invite that showed up in the mail back then. That's how you got your invites to the X Games many years ago.
Wow.
To get that invite and, to just be able to staple that thing to my bedroom wall, to me, I felt like I'd already won. So, but, to get last and then, but also get recognized by this company in Japan to say like, man, we see something in you. And that was really cool and extremely motivating. So by the time I made it to Japan for that trip and got on the contest floor, I had already kind of worked the nerves loose enough to where I just kind of rode freely and didn't think about winning or losing, and really came home with the win.
That's so exciting. Well, you mentioned earlier how artistic and this type of BMX is, right? It's not like the racing that you started out with, where it's timed and you're pedaling as fast as you can, and you mentioned how it's like dancing. I think back to the seminal BMX movie of my childhood, Rad. And it's like they literally demonstrated how freestyle BMX is like dancing at a high school dance. And for those that are Laurie Loughlin fans, Aunt Becky from Full House or whatever, she, it's not her. It's clearly a male BMX stunt, person, but they're dancing on the floor with it. So tell us what's that like. Are you able to kind of lose yourself in that, as opposed to a race where whether you're second, first, or last, or how does that dynamic differ? As somebody who grew up racing and then transitioned into that, it's competitive, but it's so artistic.
It's a really hard thing to judge, because it's really like you're judging someone's painting, because
right.
when you get to a certain level, everyone pretty much has completely different tricks and routines, and their styles are completely different. So sometimes there's a lot of controversial things that happen in judging, just because it really is like judging someone's painting. Who's to say this guy's painting is better than this guy? So over the years, it really kind of comes down to everyone's doing hard stuff. The name of the game is you got to stay on the bike in that 3-minute run. And it sounds easy to do, to stay on the bike for 3 minutes. But when you're riding a bike like this, and only one wheel's on the ground and there's a lot of balance involved, one little shaky leg because you're nervous is going to throw you off the bike. And
no, it's like riding a bull for 8 seconds, right? I mean, it only sounds easy if you're foolish enough to not know, how hard it really is, right?
Yeah.
But anybody who has seen your stuff in action, I cannot imagine that they would think that 3 minutes is easy. And I'll show an example here too. And I know we're getting ahead of the timeline a little bit here, but one of the cool things is you have been on the biggest BMX magazine covers of all times. And so for you young listeners out there that maybe aren't used to the mail era that Terry just described, in the good old days when I grew up, when he grew up, everything came through the good old snail mail, right? And so magazines were huge. There was no internet yet. Heck, there wasn't even MTV at one point, Terry, before your time when I was around. But Ride BMX, BMX Plus, these are some of the biggest covers ever. And from what I understand, Flatland didn't often make the cover. You guys are maybe 5% of the greater BMX sporting community. So would you mind, just while you're talking magazines or mentioning magazines, tell us how the heck did this happen, and what did it feel like to go from being the guy who called in the 800 numbers, or not 800 numbers, the pay numbers from the magazine, to actually being on the cover of the biggest magazines in the BMX world?
Well, I'll start off by saying I have a really obsessive personality here. So from calling the BMX magazines, to back up a little bit, I started to notice I was calling so much, they started mentioning me in the news. So there was always a news section in the magazines in the front. So they started saying, like, man, Terry called again and said that he actually got second place, not third place, when they were putting results in. And then my goal and obsession became, okay, now I want to get in the magazine. So after I accomplished that, then the next goal was, well, man, how do I get on the cover? And to be honest, I took the same style approach getting on that cover, and approach that really I don't think many BMX riders kind of went after, is I called the magazine and said, hey, that cover you're looking at the top, I said, I have this crazy trick. I call it Katrina. I made it up during Hurricane Katrina, after it hit over here in Louisiana. There was no power. I'm kind of, couldn't stay inside because it's so hot here in Louisiana. So I stayed outside the entire time there was no power, which was weeks. And I came up with this trick, and man, do you think I can get it on the cover? And their response to me was basically, man, you don't call up here and ask for a cover, Terry. You've called up here for many things. Yeah, you've called up here for many things, but don't call and ask for a cover. But in the end, they said, but look, if the trick's crazy enough, come out here to California, and you never know where it can end up. And that's exactly what I did. That was kind of enough to let me know, hey, they told me to not call and ask for a cover, but they also told me if the trick is crazy enough, it could happen. So I went out to LA and filmed the trick, and 2 months later, I ended up winning the NORA Cup in 2005, which stands for the #1 Rider Award. So they were like, man, Terry won the NORA Cup Rider of the Year. Everyone sent in the votes for him, man. This is a perfect opportunity to use this photo that we shot of him of this trick. Yes. So, and when that happened, it really kind of gave me a different type of confidence in my career, because I'm like, man, I felt like I could make anything happen from Louisiana at that point. Just, I remember going in Walmart in Hammond and looking at that magazine sitting on the shelf right next to, like, whoever was president then. I couldn't believe that I had made this dream a reality just by picking up the phone and doing the same thing I was doing when I was 12, aggravating people.
So this cover we're looking at here, this one on top, the Ride BMX, that's the Katrina trick, right?
That's it.
And so, as you mentioned, like you're barely touching the bike, right? I mean, so you talk about 3 minutes, you're in air here. You've got to somehow land this. I mean, yeah, I can't imagine how physically intense that is. Tell me, because you were talking about 2005, which is the first of several times you would win the Nora Cup and be acclaimed Rider of the Year. But there you're a fairly young man, and I'm not, 2020 when you win Rider of the Year again, you're not old yet, but that's 20 plus years into your career. How do you get into the shape to do this is question one. And then two, how do you stay in that kind of shape to be able to do that 20 years later?
Well, there's definitely like peaks and valleys in a career this long, to where there was definitely a lot of years where I was on fire. I was really on fire from like 2002 to 2014, 13, and then I became in love with the business side of riding, maybe too much, to where, I kind of knew how to make my sponsors happy. Social media got real big in 2014. So I kind of fell in love with promoting my sponsors, maintaining those current sponsors and getting new ones. And all in all, the riding level started to go down a little bit, and my focus kind of fell back a little bit for a few years. And then in 2018, my son was born, and everything kind of changed from that moment. I had always preached my entire career of like not taking things for granted. And that's was my big thing. Like, I'm not going to take this for granted because have this small sport that I'm making a living from. So I'm going to do everything I can to keep promoting my sponsors, keep promoting myself, keep promoting Flatland BMX, put it as many places as I can put it to keep this dream alive. But then after he was born, I had to look in the mirror and take a look at myself and say, man, I have kind of taken my foot off the gas. And really, he gave me the motivation when he was born to kind of get back where I'm at today. So that was 2018. And then, as you know, in 2020, everything that happened with COVID, all contests had shut down. But I'm in this mode of like wanting to be the best again. I'm in this mode of doing everything I can to get my body in shape, to the best shape of my life. And then I'm trying to create all these new tricks to put me back on the map. But I couldn't go anywhere to perform the trick. So I just locked myself in my garage for that entire year of 2020. And I think a lot of people around the world were watching that I was doing that. And I was really putting my best foot forward to try to be the best I could be. And so that was this last time that I won the Nora Cup. The votes, they still had to give out the award, and votes started pouring in.
And as I understand it, it's the vote of your peers, right? So it's fellow riders that vote. Is that correct?
It's all the pro riders around the world get
so that must be particularly gratifying, because it's one thing for the press or an industry. I mean, we all see that in sports sometimes. It can be manipulated, right? The guys with the best sponsors. I mean, we see that at the Oscars in entertainment, right? It's like it's hard to win in a little independent brand, but when it's your fellow riders, I mean, what's the saying? Game knows game, right? I mean, there's no faking that. And for a guy like you that's been on the circuit for all those decades, that had to. I know it was really touching, and here's why: because I got to see your reaction, folks. There are tons of great documentaries about Terry online. And if my producers are listening, I would like you to please put them in the comments now or later, particularly a great one by Red Bull that chronicles your 20 years of riding with them. But in that documentary, they actually show you being presented with it. I think you were riding in New Orleans. Is that right? Were you at City Park maybe? And a beautiful setting, and you're just there jamming with your friends. I don't think it was a contest or anything, right? I mean, y'all are just freestyling and sharing and being creative. And you seem to be really emotional when one of your fellow riders comes there with the big Nora Cup. I mean, guys, imagine like the Stanley Cup, the Vince Lombardi Trophy, whatever, all wrapped into one. But they present that to you in 2020 after the birth of your child, after this intense comeback. For those that watch these, you can see the training montage. You know, you train in the rain, you train in everything life can throw at you to get, you know, into the peak physical condition. What's that feel like in 2020?
It's undescribable, really. You know, to come back and win it so many years later, and to know that I still had that respect in the BMX industry, and from all the fellow riders that I compete against, and you know, all my friends from around the world that sent in that vote, to know that they respected my riding still and the effort that I put in. It meant everything to me, you know. But in 2018, when I had that goal of being the best again, that goal has definitely changed since then, because I still want to be the best, but it's more of a multi-dimensional version of that. You know,
What do you mean by that? What's the multi-dimensional version?
You know, before I just wanted to be number one again. You know, I wanted to be on the top of the podium, and that's still a high priority with me riding this much. But you know, now you know, that multi-dimensional be the best is be the best father I can be the best husband I can be, you know, be the best friend that I can be, and help bring up the other riders that are coming along behind me, and to help the contest scene out right now. I'm helping with the league. I helped start a league here in the U.S. First stop was in Vegas a few weeks ago. I have one coming up in Houston, and one after that in North Carolina. And I'm kind of a part of that league, so I'll be there riding in it. But now it feels great to kind of be behind the scenes and kind of know that there'll be something that can, you know, live on after I am done riding. So I'm not at all the main organizer of this thing, but I help found it, and I help kind of bring everyone together. And that today, it means just as much to me as winning, as knowing that I'm can be there to, you know, help the next guy get on Red Bull, or, you know, help these organizers out, since I had been to so many contests around the world, to show, man, this is what the contest in the U.S. needs to look like. Because, you know, Flatland's the smallest in the U.S., but when you go over to Europe and Asia, there's these huge contests and stadiums, and just to try to bring some of that flavor over here. Sometimes all it takes is not money, but it takes knowledge, and it takes pulling the right people together that have a passion to make something great.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're a real ambassador for the sport. And I love that you have this big picture vision, not just for you and your family, but for the, you know, the kids on the rise, the next Terry Adams that's, you know, maybe in his garage somewhere, Lord knows where, you know. But that's really neat. You mentioned your friends and family, and I want to share a few more comments that have come in from friends and family. Heather Berthelot. Heather, thank you for watching. She says, Terry, that you and your beautiful wife, Vanessa, and your son are an awesome family. Well said, Heather. You know, I'm going to circle back and ask you about Vanessa and your son and their impact on your life and your career, because you've alluded to that, Terry. But before I do so, other friends of yours are chiming in here. Kaylee, oh, it's so good to hear from Kaylee Oubre. Speaking of talented artists and creative people, what an incredible photographer she is. She's taken such good care of my family over the years. But she says that she loves that we're putting this content out. That, Terry, you're an inspiration for those that are so passionate about your skill set, and it can't help but be an obsession. She says, thank you for having the heart to share your talent and wisdom that comes from our small community. Kaylee, thank you so much. You know, because you, like Terry, have a creative genius to you that's really special, and we appreciate you chiming in. Justin Sharp says it's a great interview, and he can relate to you, Terry. because he used to be into road biking and finished second in the 60-mile Tour de Tangipahoa. Justin, thank you for tuning in and sharing that with us. The wonderful Miss Patricia Vickner, Miss Pat says, this is really awesome. She has 2 brothers and a son that love BMX bike tricks. And so she's sharing that. Miss Pat, thank you so much. Stephen Payne, your buddy. Stephen Payne, it's good to hear your name, man, going back to my little brother and Ben Richardson and all those guys in your generation. But he's sharing a YouTube link here. Hopefully that's maybe one of these documentaries about you, Terry.
Steven was one of the ones that worked at the bike shop.
Really?
Taking care of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, I still keep in touch with Steven, still invite him out to anything that I do BMX wise. And man, like I say, the lifelong friends that I created, just around Hammond, that caught me riding that bike has just been amazing.
Well, and one thing I hear about you is that you're great about staying in touch. I mean, you and Steven probably met 25 years ago, it sounds like,
Yeah, 30.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's cool that you stay in touch, because look, let's face it, a lot of guys 30 years ago, we're talking about multiple NORA Cups ago, right? I mean, some guys would have forgotten all their friends in 2005s when you win the X Games, or, certainly by the next few years when you're winning NORA Cups, 2 in a matter of a few years. But you haven't gotten too big for your britches. You still remember guys you came up with, including our mutual buddy, Trevor Bordelon. Now, Trevor's more my age, and he was the top BMX racer in our neighborhood when I was a kid. But he says it seems like yesterday, Terry, that he met you in college. Trevor has been on this show before, folks. If you know Trevor or want to know more about him, he and his beautiful wife did a great interview here. But we have to mention now, while we have, the preeminent BMXer around on the show, that Trevor is putting together a pretty cool event this Saturday here in Ponchatoula, right down there at our Berry parking lot by City Hall. He is going to do a showing of the 1980s movie Rad, which, of course, I think, well, Terry, you can correct me if you know, I think it's the first, movie about BMX. It was certainly the biggest of my childhood. And not only is he going to show the movie on a big screen there in the parking lot, but he's got the star of the show, Bill Allen, better known as Crew Jones, the protagonist of Rad, who's going to fly all the way in from California to meet everybody, hang out, talk about the show. And it's my understanding that you've actually met Crew Jones or Bill Allen before. Is that right, Terry? Could you tell us about that?
It is. First off, I'll say that movie, pretty much any BMX rider that is a pro from the 90s, from the 80s, even today, I mean, the movie changed everything. When it first came out, I'll tell you, my wife definitely hates watching it with me because I know word for word the entire thing. But yeah, I've met Bill, and
so you can't get her to go butt sliding into a river with you like the romantic scene, right? She's out on Rad.
Kind of a cool thing too. These guys that are filming my documentary, they're doing a documentary with a guy named Eddie Fiola, and that movie Rad is based on Eddie's story. So they're doing, and Eddie was a rider from the 80s. So I think they're actually going to get a interview with Bill while he's out here. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. That's so cool, man. That's really neat. So it's cool to hear that, that influence, not just guys like me and Trevor, who went on to different careers, but guys like you who would, help inspire to actually be a real life Crew Jones and go beyond Hell Track into, bigger things.
Yeah, it was really that cool opening scene that really got me.
But that's Flatland, right? And that's the real pros. I mean, I don't. Is that like Dennis McCoy, R.L. Osborne, Eddie, who you mentioned? Like those are, as I recall, the top pros of the day.
It was all those guys in the beginning of it, and that really caught my attention. Obviously, the movie was great, and that movie changed everything in BMX. But that opening scene where, they were riding more old school Flatland, but man, with the fog and the parking lot, it was something else. So
yeah. So folks, if you don't have plans for this Saturday, it's May 18th, 6:00, right there in Ponchatoula. Come check it out. It's free of charge. This is just a great idea Trevor had, a wild idea. I was so grateful he reached out to me, my law firm. We're able to play a smart role. We're sponsoring it along with others, and it's gonna be really cool. And the other cool part is Trevor has assembled a collection of really neat old BMX bikes. So if you want to see what the bikes look like when Crew Jones was riding them in the '80s, he's got some special things to share with you, as well as other bikes that aren't competitive BMX, but just really cool bikes in general. Denzel Jones says, Terry, you're such an amazing rider. I always look forward to experience the person you are, the random texts, the hugs, the interest you have in other people. Thank you for who you are to the world. That's special.
Thank you.
Stephen Payne coming back here to confirm. Yep,
Yep.
you are great at staying in touch. And Matt Emmons, great guy, heck of a real estate transactional lawyer here. He says Terry, Vanessa, and he were in 6th grade together, and he's pretty sure that they were a couple then. Wow, awesome to see them together after all these years, doing great things for our area and beyond. Matt, thanks for sharing that. I remember you when you were a little kid. I coached you when you were playing baseball, and you were a great kid then and a great man now, a great dad. It's fun to see you walk your kids to school. So let's get to that. Matt's talking about you and Vanessa going way back. Tell us about your beautiful wife and your family, your son.
Yeah.
Tell us about that part of your life and who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I met Vanessa in 2nd or 3rd grade, so I would say that it was then and then it was history, but obviously we had to grow up a little bit. We grew up a little bit, and we reconnected just because her mom and my mom just became best friends as we were little kids, so they always stayed in touch. So really, the moment Vanessa became single and I became single, our moms kind of stepped in and put us back in close touch, and that's kind of the long story short, and here we are. But I was definitely hanging out with her when I was a little bitty kid, telling her I was going to marry her, probably when we were 10 years old. So
That's cool.
It's cool to be here today and know that it actually happened. So we definitely have some photos of us on the playground together at DC Rees or Tucker, hanging out. We used to get snowballs together. We used to trick or treat every year. So it's we really know each other.
Well, what a special thing for your moms, to see their plan work. You mentioned the photos when you're kids. So one of the people that reached out to me when she heard that I was interviewing you this week was Ashley Richardson, married to Ben Richardson. Ashley LaPlante, for those of you that may remember her from PHS days. Stephen Payne, excuse me. She gave a shout out to you. You guys, as being connectors and friends of hers and Terry's and Ben's and all. But there's a great photograph of her and her now husband Ben when they were little that their parents took, a decade or more before they ever hooked up romantic. They would become high school sweethearts, and the rest is history. But it's so neat to have those things in your life, and you have this picture when you were like your kids' age. So that's really neat. Now I know the two of you are entrepreneurs. I'm gonna get into that if you don't mind a little later, because I think it can inspire people on how you can expand beyond your core focus, right? I mean, clearly you're killing it in BMX. You're a great rider. You mentioned the business side, and I'm going to ask you in a bit about your sponsorships and business opportunities that the sport affords. But I know that back here at home, you have been building a little real estate, or I shouldn't say little, but building a real estate empire of sorts, and other passive income things. And your wife, I'm sure, plays a big part in that. So why don't we take this opportunity to talk sponsorships? You've mentioned a few: Red Bull on your cap. You've been with them 20 plus years. Canes on your shirt. Tell us about how you got into the world of sponsorships. Talk about any of them you want, but please for sure share this special relationship that you have with Red Bull, because Red Bull is synonymous with what I would say cool sports, right? I mean, it seems like all the time, no matter where you are on, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, somewhere out of left field comes this incredible Red Bull video with somebody, wakeboarding off the side of a Singapore skyscraper or doing flatland BMX or whatever. So, but you're like early to the table, right? I mean, how did that happen? And you just tell us about sponsors, but I really want to hear about Red Bull, please.
Really, that contest in Japan that I was telling you about, after I won it, I came home, and a good friend of mine, Scott O'Brien, still one of my best friends today, he was getting a hold of Red Bull as Red Bull was very new in the U.S. Because he wanted to put on a flatland contest in New Orleans, and he had told them a little bit about me, but he basically said, it means nothing for me to tell them about you. You need to come here and meet some of these people from Red Bull. And at the time, I had my girlfriend, picking her up from Ponchatoula High School every, and when she gets off, and I was like, man, I'm picking up my girlfriend, and that at that time I just had my license a few years. I didn't feel like going to his house. I'm like, go to your house and not ride, just to meet some people. And he told me, man, if you come here, that it could change your life by meeting these people. And I'm really glad that he told me that. And I loaded up and I went over there because he was showing them, or really telling them how the contest needed to happen in New Orleans, and what it should look like. And I showed up and I had this VHS tape and I popped it into his TV, and these two people were there from Red Bull, and I let them see the contest in Japan. And as they're watching these finalists in the top three, they see me and on this video footage, and they go, man, this is crazy. Who won this? And I said, oh, actually, I won. And they said, really? And I said, yeah. And I probably got a call less than 2 months after that from Red Bull, and says, hey, we want to sign you to be our athlete. And that has been such a game changer for me and for any BMX rider that is able to wear this Red Bull hat or a Red Bull helmet, because it's kind of the as far as extreme sports go, if you get Red Bull, it's kind of that sponsor that can support your dreams. Not only the financial things that come along with having an endorsement like that, but just me having an idea and them wanting to help me with that idea and make that idea happen. Just so many different things that I wanted to do, that I called them and said, hey, I got this crazy idea. I want to ride flatland on the wing of a 747. I want to ride flatland on the side of a mountain. I want to go to Singapore and ride. I want to, bring me to Hong Kong. There's a contest there. Just the amount of countries that they've sent me to and the opportunities that they've given me to promote myself in flatland. And then to just still be sitting here 20 plus years later wearing this hat is like, I can't even believe it,
Well, you mentioned the extreme part of Red Bull sports, and I want to count on it because I think you just brought us to the realm where flatland kind of ceases to be pure flat land and ends up in some dangerous places, like the wing of the 747. Because one of the documentary footages or portions that I enjoyed watching of you is, one friend of yours, a photographer, takes you to the top of an abandoned building. And they're like taking photos, but they're like, you can't really tell you're on top of a building. And then suddenly you get on the edge of the building and you're riding, and it's the same type of thing we saw, with the magazines here, guys, where he's, barely holding on to the bike, if at all. I mean, this shot here, you're not even touching the bike if you look closely at it. But, what's it like to do some of these? It seems to me crazy, but really dangerous. I mean, is that something that you had to change over time now that you have a kid? You're like, hey, the wife won't let me on the side of a building with no net below, I mean, because flatland is not always just on the backyard pavement, right? I mean, you guys, for some of these shoots, y'all go pretty crazy places.
For the most part, what you really need for flatland to work is you need a flat space, So that's the cool thing about flatland, is you can really take it anywhere that has a flat space. So there might not be a flat space on the side of a mountain, but you can build one,
Right.
So over the years, I really kind of became obsessed with bringing flatland to all these places that had never been before. So that's what, just took me recently in the heart of Tennessee, and, where they built me a stage and I rode with all these fireflies, because it was like, once a year these fireflies come around, and I took a photo in the midst of all those flies, and
Yes.
on the side of a mountain, like I said, the plane once underneath the water. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
not ideal to ride flatland in those spaces, but for the imagery and to
Right.
promote flatland, I've definitely spent some time over the years putting flatland in those spaces so people can kind of turn their head and go, "Wow, this is something really cool."
Yeah. Well, let's talk. I mentioned earlier, your business career, because, I've at this point not only seen some of these documentaries, but heard you on podcasts about, everything from your riding career to personal finance. And so, in hearing some of that, I learned that you've been on this journey to expand your revenue sources, and you've taken money you may earn on the bike, and put it into things like real estate investments. How did that get started? I happen to know there's one kind of really big name in our local community because he owns half the area, it seems. But how did you develop some of these special relationships with people that know commercial real estate, residential real estate, and just investing in general? And how did you set off on that journey, and what prompted it?
Really, at a young age, when I started getting those checks in the mail to ride my bike for a living, I also, it came with a bit of worry because although it felt really nice to get a monthly salary to ride a bike, it was in the back of my mind, like, oh, this could stop any day. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, what else can I do that just kind of feels like I'm getting checks in the mail, or what else can I do that can kind of set me up for the future, or how can I do something with what little bit of money I have coming in to prepare for what's to come, which it's inevitable. One day I will not have this Red Bull hat on. One day I will not be sponsored by Raising Cane's. So I always had this fear of what am I going to do? Now, thankfully, I hope I'm years from that because I'm doing everything in my power right now to stay riding at a high level and promote my sponsors. But at the time, having that in the back of my head, I was riding in Hobby Lobby parking lot, and that's kind of where I practiced for years and years. I probably spent 8 hours a day out there in Hammond, right across from Walmart. And
Wait, we've got a comment on that topic. Matt Summers says he can remember 20 plus years ago sitting in the Hobby Lobby parking lot watching you do tricks on your bike. No
yeah,
telling how many hours you spent out there, right?
yeah, it was probably 8 hours a day. I ate my
Wow.
breakfast and lunch and sometimes dinner out there. So I just
Wow.
spent all day, and no one ever told me to leave ever. And I
Good
thought
for
that was
Hobby
cool.
Lobby, or whoever owns that property. Good for them
Yeah.
for letting you pursue your dream there.
Well, what happened was Mr. Ed came up and told me I had to leave.
so
And
so Ed Hoover, the man I was alluding to, your
yeah,
financial mentor and good friend, he tells you you've got to leave. Thankfully, the story doesn't end there. He's not just a villain who runs you off of the place, but y'all get a relationship, right? So
yeah.
tell
I
us
mean,
about how that develops.
basically, that day started that friendship and that relationship and that mentorship. He said, you got to get out of here. And I said, man, I'm preparing for the world championships right now in Portugal. And he said, well, if you're serious and this is what you do and this is really where you need to ride, come to my office and I'll write you written permission, that you can ride here. But you need to be there at 7 a.m. If you're there at
Yeah.
7:01, I ain't dealing with you. And
That sounds
so,
like Mr.
yeah,
Ed.
at the time, his office was in the O'Reilly's building.
Right.
This was probably 2002, 2003. I showed up there. I got my permission slip to ride, and then, over the years, he would see me riding in there, and he would stop and give me very friendly advice on what I should be doing to prepare for my future. And he knew that I didn't make a lot of money riding bikes, but he also knew that you don't need a lot of money to prepare for your future. You just need to be smart with the money that's coming in. So I really listened to him, and every time he came, I would stop doing tricks. The bike would go down. I would sit on the bike, and I would listen to him. And I took all that knowledge in, and still to this day, I all the way from me buying my first rental property, he kind of helped me with that process, and then years later, ended up getting one of Mr. Ed's first properties from him, which was a commercial property. And to just think that how that relationship started, that all because I stayed in touch with him and, kept calling his office and, kept having those conversations with him. I could have easily been in that parking lot and just mouthed off to him, and none of it would have ever happened if I just would have got hot-headed. So I'm glad that I kind of took a breath and said, he says he owns the parking lot. Let me talk to him. And it became a beautiful friendship and mentorship. And now when we talk, we don't really talk about real estate, as my real estate goals have changed. It's those conversations with me and Mr. Ed are more about life and family. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, he's such a great guy, and with deep roots here in Ponchatoula. He now lives up in Hammond, but from Western Auto and much more. His roots run deep here in Ponchatoula, as do his real estate holdings, obviously. But he's been a very generous mentor to you, but to many others, and it's not something that he broadcasts or brags about. He's a guy who will make the time for someone who's in need of advice and guidance. And you don't see that out of a lot of people with his level of wealth. And, quite frankly, he's a very important man. He's got limited time. But
you got to think at that time when he stopped out there, I had this big tattoo on my stomach. My hair is in braids, and I'm playing rap music, blasting out of my car, and I'm doing tricks in his parking lot, spinning around on a bike. And to his knowledge, like this guy's about to sue me.
It's funny because I'm thinking at the same time frame you're talking about, I used to have a regular Friday morning breakfast at Lee's Diner in Hammond with a group of my buddies, and we were next to the Ed Hoover table where he would hold court with his buddies. And there could not have been a more polar opposite to describe what you were into and what those guys were into. Mr. Al Link and Carl Speed and all these great old guys, Charlie Salina, but they were not into any of that. So it's cool to see the two of you come together as an odd couple and have this special relationship. So thank you for sharing that with us, because I know a lot of our viewers and listeners love Mr. Ed as they love you, and probably would not have placed y'all together. But that's one of the beauties of our little community, is there relationships that you might not suspect that happen here all the time. Terry, you've been incredibly generous with your time. We're nearing the end here where I'm going to have to let you get back to all that you have going on. But before we do, if you don't mind, it's not lost on me that you have been incredibly successful in multiple phases of life. Clearly on the bike, you have this incredible career, and there are magazine covers and Nora Cups and all the awards, to justify that and to prove that. But it seems like you've been equally successful in life, and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps with your mom and your family, to the next level of financial success. But to have a beautiful family, as described earlier, you, your wife, your son. So, I say all that to build up to the question of, kind of an advice type column. If some kid on a bike or on a skateboard or whatever the next version of that is, but just any 16-year-old kid, think back to when you turned pro, if they were to come to you and ask for advice, not just about how to make it, as a rider and how to excel for 20 plus years, 30 years, but, in life too. I mean, what advice do you have to our listeners, to our viewers, on how to do it? Because, your life hasn't been perfect, and you don't claim to be perfect, but man, what you've accomplished is incredible. And you've proved that dreams can come true right here. It started in Ponchatoula. You're still around here. Ponchatoula, Hammond, the people listening to this little bitty podcast, the same could be true for them. So what advice would you share with our listeners before we go?
Really, when I think about everything that's kind of happened in my life, it really just everything's kind of happened from just, it sounds cliche, but just not giving up and not really taking no for an answer, because I did get many no's along the way. I probably had 100 companies tell me no before one bike company picked up the phone and said, well, we can make it happen. When I was trying to get on the Ellen DeGeneres show, I called that number for many, many years, trying to get on that show, and then leaving messages
I
on
was
there.
in my notes to cover, but Terry, there's just so much. I couldn't get to it all. You've been on Ellen and Glee, right?
And look, all that stuff happened from me just not taking no for an answer. That one time the Ellen show called me back and they said, hey, we want you on the show on Tuesday. And I said, great. I was excited after years of calling them. And then they didn't call to book my flight, and I lost touch with them. But the mistake that they made is they left their number on my caller ID. So I continued to call that number for another 2 years until they finally probably said, this is about the last time this guy's going to call. We're just going to get him out here. But I've really kind of taken that mindset in life of just not giving up, just being extremely relentless with not only the hard work, but pursuing everything that I'm going after, to where, I just really don't give up. And that's really the message to any kid or anyone out there. Don't let anything stand in your way, no matter what that is, because I definitely had a lot of things standing in my way with my learning disability. Still today, I have trouble cranking up a lawnmower, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Just anything with directions. Vanessa has built every piece of furniture in our house because I can't read directions. I have lived in Ponchatoula, Hammond area my entire life. I'll still turn down a one-way street. But I can get on this bike and make a living from it. So that's all because I put all my energy and all my focus into riding the bike. And at 40 years old, maybe I'll never learn how to crank the lawnmower. But at this point, it is what it is.
You keep riding like you are and being who you are, and you won't need to, man. Plenty of people will step into that gap and help you with it, beyond your wife. You've seen from the comments, man, there's love coming from all over. You've got friends around the world, and you never lost your friends here at home. And they're here for you, man. So what an inspiring story. Folks, if you would like to learn more about Terry, all you got to do is Google Terry Adams, but his website is Terry Adams BMX. Check that out. There's just so much. Terry, again, thank you for sharing your story, your time. It's also valuable. You're truly an inspiration to our community. Before we go, is there anything else on your mind, on your heart, anything at all you'd like to share with everyone?
Really, just I love this community. I love the Ponchatoula, Hammond area. I love that you can go down the street and 9 times out of 10, you're going to find someone that and you're going to find someone that you love, and someone that's been behind you. One of the greatest things about, my career and just living here in general is just the people and the friends, and the fact that everyone stays in touch and everyone is so close. I love the fact that I can go to Target and I'm going to see 5 people that I know. So that's the reason I'm here, and that's the reason I'll never leave.
Well, I sure thank you. It's been a true honor to get to know you better and to share this hour with you. And you inspire me. And I just, your love of our community as a parent, it's so sincere. And anyway, you're one of the many people that make this place so special. So kids, if you're watching, dreams can come true. They can come true from right here, worldwide dreams. And Terry's living proof. So Terry, thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate it. To our viewers, thanks for sticking with us to the end. We'll see you next week. Y'all take care.